My husband cheated on me and said I wasn't woman enough for him, and even my best friends defended him. My name is Rachel, I'm 31 years old, and I need to tell a story that completely changed my life. I know it might sound like one of those dramatic accounts you read on the internet, but I swear every word is true. Until just a few months ago, I was just an ordinary housewife in Portland, Oregon, married for 6 years to Brian, a sales manager at a tech company. Our life seemed normal, even predictable. I took care of the house, he worked, we had our friends, our quiet weekends. But you know how it is when something inside you starts whispering that something isn't right? It was small changes in Brian that started bothering me. First, he started working later, coming home at 10, 11 at night, always with an excuse about urgent reports or client meetings. Then came the new cologne, an Armani I'd never seen before, quite different from what he'd always worn. And the clothes. Suddenly my husband, who had always been relaxed about dressing, started wearing impeccable dress shirts and pants that looked like they'd come straight from the store. The phone was what caught my attention most. Brian had always been one of those who left his phone anywhere, but now he was always with the device in hand, always face down, always on silent. When I asked who was texting, he'd respond with a dry work and change the subject. Sometimes I'd catch him smiling at the screen in a way that he hadn't smiled at me in a long time. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. After all 6 years of marriage, we'd built a life together. We bought our house in Hawthorne, had plans to have children next year. But that feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. It was like I was living with a stranger who wore my husband's face. One Thursday afternoon, everything changed. I was organizing the office when our shared iPad beeped with a new message. It wasn't my intention to snoop, I swear it wasn't. But the notification appeared right on the screen. It was a message from someone called M saying, "Can't wait for our weekend getaway. She still doesn't suspect anything." My world collapsed at that moment. My hands were shaking so much, I almost dropped the iPad. I read the message about 5 times before I could process what I was seeing. That was me. Our getaway. That was betrayal. And M. Well, I already had my suspicions about who that could be. When Brian came home that night, I was sitting in the living room, the iPad on the coffee table, open to exactly the conversation I'd found. He walked through the door, still with that smile I no longer recognized, until he saw my face. The smile disappeared instantly. "Rachel, I can explain." "Explain what, Brian?" My voice came out calmer than I expected. "Explain who M is? Explain the getaway? Or explain why your wife is treated as she in your conversations?" He sighed, ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I knew well that he always did when he was nervous. But this time, instead of nervousness, I saw something different. Relief, as if he could finally stop pretending. "It's Melissa," he said, throwing himself into the armchair as if that conversation were an inconvenience. "Melissa from the company. And yes, we're seeing each other." The coldness in his voice shocked me more than the confession itself. There was no guilt, no remorse, just a man tired of maintaining a charade. "How long?" I asked, still trying to maintain composure. 6 months, he replied, as if he were talking about the weather. "Look, Rachel, I didn't want you to find out like this, but maybe it's better. We both know this hasn't been working for a long time. 6 months. Half a year of my life living a lie." I remembered Melissa, his new supervisor. A 34-year-old woman, recently divorced, always impeccably dressed at company events. She was everything I wasn't. Successful, independent, sophisticated, and apparently also a homewrecker. "Why, Brian?" was all I could ask. And then came the blow that destroyed me more than the betrayal itself. He looked me in the eyes and said with a cruelty I never imagined he possessed, "Because I needed a real woman? Rachel. Not an insecure, unambitious housewife. Melissa challenges me, inspires me. She has goals, has her own life. You only exist in relation to me, and that's suffocating." Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I'd always thought that taking care of our home, supporting his dreams, always being there for him was what a marriage should be. But there, in that moment, I realized that to him, I wasn't a partner. I was just a shadow, a convenience. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the tick-tock of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant noise of traffic outside. But inside me, everything was completely silent, as if my soul had left my body to protect itself from the pain. "You're right," I said finally, getting up from the armchair. "This hasn't been working for a long time." Brian seemed surprised by my calm. I think he expected tears, pleas, maybe even a fight. but I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. That night, I called my sister Lisa, who lives across town. She came to pick me up without asking questions. And I left the house that had been mine for 5 years carrying only a suitcase with the essentials. I left Brian there, with his new life and his real woman. But this is just the first part of the story. Because what I didn't know at that moment was that my husband's betrayal would be just the beginning, and that the people I trusted most in the world were about to give me an even crueler lesson about who we really were to each other. The next day, I decided to call my best friends, Lauren and Nicole. The three of us had been inseparable since college. I was maid of honor at Lauren's wedding, and Nicole was my confidant in everything. If anyone could help me get through this, it would be them. I arranged to meet them at our favorite cafe, the Blue Star, in downtown Portland. I arrived first, chose our usual table in the corner, and ordered a chai latte, my usual drink when I needed comfort. When they arrived, I could see in their faces that something was different. It wasn't worry or compassion, it was discomfort. "Hi, Rachel," Lauren greeted me, but not with her usual warm hug. Nicole gave me a distant wave and sat across the table, as if she wanted to keep her distance. "Girls, you can't imagine what I went through yesterday," I began, hoping to find in them the support I so desperately needed. Brian was cheating on me. For 6 months. With Melissa from his company. What I expected was shock, indignation, words of support. What I received was a look between them. One of those looks that say more than 1,000 words. "Rachel," Nicole said, nervously stirring her coffee cup. We know." The world stopped again. "You know?" "No, since when?" "Since the beginning," Lauren replied. And for the first time in 15 years of friendship, she couldn't look me in the eyes. I saw them together at the Italian restaurant near his company. That was in October. 5 months ago. They'd known for 5 months and hadn't told me anything. I felt like I'd taken a second blow, maybe even worse than the first. "And you decided, what? To leave me in ignorance?" My voice started to tremble, the composure I'd maintained until then beginning to crack. "It wasn't our place," Nicole said, but her voice sounded false even to her. "We didn't want to get involved in your marriage." "Get involved?" I almost screamed, making other people in the cafe look at our table. "You're my best friends. I would have told you." That's when Lauren dropped the bomb that completely destroyed me. "Look, Rachel, maybe it's better this way. Brian, he didn't seem happy for a long time. And Melissa, she's incredible. She has a brilliant career, is independent, sophisticated. Maybe he really deserves someone who can keep up with his pace." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My best friend, the woman I considered a sister, was defending my cheating husband. "He deserves someone better?" I repeated, incredulous. "Are you serious? It's not that you're not a good person." Nicole tried to soften it, but only made it worse. "It's that you both wanted different things from life. He's ambitious, wants to grow, travel, and you, well, you've always been more homely, more traditional. Traditional, homely. As if those were dirty words, character flaws. As if the fact that I'd chosen to take care of our home, support his dreams, always be present, was something lesser. Something that made me less worthy of love and fidelity. "So you think I deserve to be cheated on?" I asked, tears finally starting to fall down my face. "Think I deserved to be deceived for months?" "That's not it," Lauren said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's that maybe you two are better as friends. Brian always said you were more like a sister than a wife." That was the end. Not just of our meeting, but of 15 years of friendship. I got up from the table, grabbed my purse, and looked at the two women I thought knew me better than anyone. "You're both pathetic," I said, and for the first time in that conversation, my voice was firm. "Congratulations for choosing the side of the man who destroyed a marriage instead of the friend who was always on your side." I left the cafe without looking back. At that moment, I didn't just have a cheating husband. I had lost the 3 most important people in my life all at once. But what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. Because Brian, Lauren and Nicole weren't going to be satisfied with just breaking me. They wanted to destroy me completely. And in the next few days, I would discover just how far people can go when they want to justify their own bad actions. When I returned to my sister Lisa's house that afternoon, I was devastated. It wasn't just the pain of betrayal or the loss of friendships. It was the feeling that I had lived an entire life based on lies, that the people I loved most in the world had never seen me as I really was. Lisa found me crying in the guest room that had become my temporary refuge. My sister had always been my opposite. Where I was conciliatory, she was direct. Where I avoided conflicts, she faced them head-on. But at that moment, she simply sat beside me on the bed and hugged me. "Tell me everything," she said. And I told her. About Brian, about Melissa, about Lauren and Nicole, about how I was questioning every choice I'd made in recent years, every moment when I'd prioritized others' happiness over my own. "You know what makes me angriest?" I said to her. "It's not even the fact that he cheated on me. It's the way he talked to me, as if I were less. As if all these years when I supported his dreams, took care of the house, made his life my priority, were nothing." Lisa was silent for a moment before responding. "Rachel, you want to know what I think? I think you're stronger than any of them imagine, including yourself." At that moment, I couldn't see any strength in me. I felt like a ghost of the person I used to be. But Lisa's words planted a seed that, without my knowing, would start to grow in the coming days. The following Monday, I decided I needed to go back to work. I was an administrative assistant at a veterinary clinic, a job I loved, even if it wasn't exactly what one might call ambitious. I needed normalcy, routine, something to remind me of who I was besides being Brian's ex-wife. But when I arrived at work, I realized the news had spread. Conversations stopped when I passed. Pitying looks followed me through the hallways. I imagined that Lauren or Nicole had told someone, and the gossip had spread as it usually does in small towns. It was during lunch that I discovered the truth. My colleague Jessica approached me with a worried expression. "Rachel, did you see Brian's Facebook?" she asked hesitantly. I hadn't seen it. Actually, I deleted all my social media in recent days, trying to protect myself from anything that might hurt me even more. But the expression on Jessica's face told me I needed to see it. She showed me her phone, and there it was. A long post from Brian, published on Sunday, that basically painted our separation as if it were my fault. He talked about how he'd tried to save the marriage, but that I was controlling and emotionally unstable. He said I suffocated him, and that he'd found happiness again with someone who understood him. The post had dozens of likes and comments, most from people I knew. And the comments were devastating. People I considered friends were agreeing with him, talking about how I'd always seemed clingy and how Brian deserved to be happy. I felt physically sick. It wasn't just the public humiliation. It was the realization that Brian had managed to control the narrative of our separation, turning me into the villain of the story while he was the misunderstood hero. But the worst was yet to come. Because when I got home that night, I found Lisa waiting for me with an expression I'd never seen on her face. It was a mixture of anger and something that looked like planning. "We need to talk," she said, pulling me into the kitchen. "Because I just found out some things about your dear ex-husband and his new girlfriend that you need to know." I sat at the kitchen table, prepared for another devastating revelation. But what Lisa told me that night would change everything. She'd received a call from a former co-worker, someone who worked at the same company as Brian. "What Brian and Melissa did to you isn't new," Lisa said, her eyes shining with a rage I rarely saw in her. "They've done this before, at least twice that this person knows of." Apparently, Melissa had a pattern. She targeted married men in the company, especially those in positions that could benefit her career. And Brian? Well, Brian wasn't exactly the victim of love he painted himself as on social media. "There's more," Lisa continued. "This person wants to talk to you, said she has information that could help you. But Rachel," she held my hand, "she also said you need to be careful, that the situation might be more dangerous than it seems." Dangerous. That word echoed in my mind. Until then, I'd thought of the situation as painful, humiliating, devastating. But dangerous? What else was beneath that seemingly simple betrayal? "She wants to meet you tomorrow," Lisa said. "Public place, during lunch. Said her name is Amanda and that she has something very important to tell you." I stayed awake all night, thinking. Part of me wanted to just move on, start a new life away from all that drama. But another part, a part that was starting to wake up after years of being asleep, wanted answers, wanted to know the complete truth about what had happened to me. The next morning, I called Amanda. Her voice sounded nervous, almost whispering, as if she were afraid of being heard. "Rachel, I know you don't know me, but I worked with Brian and Melissa for 2 years, and I saw what they did to you, what they did to other people." "Other people?" I asked. "Meet me today at Pearl District Cafe at noon. There are things you need to know. But Rachel," she paused, "be careful who you trust. This situation goes far beyond a simple marital betrayal." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity. It wasn't just about what Amanda had to tell me. It was about myself, about who I could be when I stopped seeing myself through others' eyes. While getting ready for the meeting, I looked in the mirror and saw not the insecure and unambitious woman Brian had described, but someone who was starting to awaken. Someone who maybe, just maybe, was much stronger than anyone imagined. The walk to Pearl District Cafe was different from any I'd ever taken. Each step seemed to take me not just to a meeting with a stranger, but toward a version of myself I didn't know. For the first time in months, I wasn't running from something. I was walking toward answers. Amanda was waiting for me at a table in the back of the cafe, and I recognized her immediately. She was one of the few people from Brian's company who had always been kind to me at social events. A woman in her 40s, brown hair tied in a bun, discreet framed glasses. She looked nervous, constantly glancing at the door. "Rachel," she stood up when she saw me. "Thank you for coming. I know this must be strange for you." We sat down and she ordered a black coffee, her hands trembling slightly. I ordered my usual chai latte, trying to maintain some normalcy in a situation that was becoming increasingly surreal. "Amanda, what do you have to tell me?" I asked directly. She took a deep breath and began. "What happened to you wasn't an accident, Rachel. It was calculated. Melissa has a pattern, a method. She studies the married men in the company, identifies those who can help her career, and then she seduces them." "But why specifically married men?" I asked. "Because married men are more vulnerable to emotional blackmail," Amanda explained. "They have more to lose. And when the relationship inevitably explodes, they're desperate to justify their actions. That's when she gets what she wants." Amanda opened a folder she'd brought with her. "In the last 2 years, I've documented everything. Sarah Martinez, who worked in the marketing department, Melissa destroyed her marriage the same way. Jennifer Walsh, from accounting, same thing. In both cases, the husbands were promoted soon after starting relationships with Melissa." I looked at the documents she was showing me. They were emails, text messages, photos, a clear pattern of manipulation and destruction. "But why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why do you care?" Amanda was silent for a moment, stirring her coffee. "Because Sarah Martinez was my best friend. I saw what that did to her. She left town, lost custody of her children, went into depression, and I did nothing to help her." "And Brian?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "Brian isn't an innocent victim," Amanda said, her voice becoming firmer. "He's an accomplice. He helps Melissa spy on the wives, find vulnerabilities. They work together to destroy marriages and then build narratives that justify their actions." I felt anger growing inside me, but it was different from the desperate pain I'd felt in recent days. It was a cold, calculated anger. "There's more," Amanda continued. "The company isn't just their playground. The director's husband, Patricia Williams, is involved. There are suspicions he receives bribes to turn a blind eye to Melissa's behavior. And if that's true, it's a crime," I completed. "Exactly. And Rachel, I think you could be the key to exposing all of this. But you need to be careful. These people are dangerous when they feel cornered." When I left the cafe that afternoon, I was no longer the same person who had entered. I had information, I had evidence, and for the first time in a long time, I had a purpose. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It was about preventing other women from going through what I had gone through. But first, I needed a plan. And I needed allies. Because if Amanda was right about the danger, I couldn't do this alone. That night, I called my sister Lisa and told her everything. She was silent for a long moment before responding. "Rachel, are you sure you want to get involved in this? You could just move on, start over somewhere else." "I could," I said, "but then other women will suffer what I suffered, and I can't live with that. So what do you want to do?" For the first time in weeks, I smiled. "I want them to destroy themselves, and I think I know exactly how to make that happen." The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who had a mission. The phone call that would change everything came right after breakfast. "Hello, Rachel?" The voice on the other end of the line was feminine, sophisticated, with a slight accent I couldn't identify. "My name is Patricia Williams. I'm the wife of the director of the company where your husband works. I'd very much like to talk to you." Patricia Williams. The name Amanda had mentioned. The director's wife who might be involved in the whole situation. "About what, exactly?" I asked cautiously. "About Melissa Richardson and her pattern of behavior in the company. About how she and some employees have been destroying families and careers. And about how we can, together, put an end to this." The conversation lasted only a few minutes. But when I hung up, I knew my life had changed once again. Patricia wanted to meet me that same afternoon, At a discreet restaurant outside the city. She said she had evidence, documents, and a plan. But Rachel, she said before hanging up, you need to know that once we go down this path, there's no turning back. Are you prepared for that? I looked at my reflection in Lisa's kitchen window. The woman looking back at me was no longer the insecure housewife Brian had described. She was someone I was just beginning to know. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. The restaurant Patricia chose was in Lake Oswego, a small town about 20 minutes from Portland. It was an elegant, discreet place, frequented mainly by businessmen and professionals who value privacy. I arrived a few minutes before the scheduled time and chose a table overlooking the lake. Patricia Williams was different from what I expected. A woman in her 50s, perfectly styled gray hair, dressed in a navy blue blazer that screamed quality and power. She had the kind of presence that makes people turn when she enters a room. But what impressed me most were her eyes. Cold, calculating, but also with a gleam that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. Rachel, she said, greeting me with a firm handshake. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I know you must be confused by all this. Confused is an understatement, I admitted. Until a week ago, I thought my life was normal. Now it seems like I was living in a soap opera. Patricia smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something I didn't. Normal, she repeated. Interesting how our perception of normalcy can be so limited. She ordered white wine. I ordered sparkling water. There was something in the atmosphere of that meeting that told me I needed to keep my mind clear. Let's get straight to the point, Patricia said after the waitress left. Melissa Richardson is a problem my husband and I have been monitoring for a long time. She's intelligent, manipulative, and extremely dangerous to the company's stability. Does your husband know about her pattern? I asked. My husband, Patricia said with a tone that suggested complexity, is in a delicate position. He knows, but his hands are tied by legal and corporate issues. Firing someone for inappropriate sexual behavior without solid evidence can result in million-dollar lawsuits. She opened an elegant folder she'd brought with her. But evidence is exactly what we have. What she showed me was impressive. Not just documents about Melissa, but a complete dossier on her victims. Photos, emails, human resources records, even conversation recordings. Everything meticulously organized and documented. Sarah Martinez, she said, pointing to a photo. Married for 12 years, 2 daughters. Melissa seduced her husband, Thomas, who was a project manager. When the relationship exploded, Thomas was promoted and Sarah was forced to resign. Jennifer Walsh, she continued. Married for 8 years, 1 son, same pattern, husband promoted, she left the company. And now you, Patricia concluded, looking me directly in the eyes. But with you, Rachel, I think we have a unique opportunity. Opportunity for what? To end this once and for all. To expose not just Melissa, but the entire corruption network that allows her to continue doing what she does. Patricia leaned forward, her voice getting lower. You know about the company's annual party, don't you? It's in 2 weeks. All employees, all families, all investors. It's the most important social event of the year. I knew about the party. Brian always insisted I go, though I always felt out of place among all those successful professionals. What do you have in mind? I asked. I have in mind, Patricia said, a revelation that will change everything. But I need your help. I need you to attend the party as my personal guest. I don't understand. You will soon, Patricia said with that mysterious smile. But first, I need you to trust me. And I need you to be prepared to see your ex-husband and Melissa exposed in the most public way possible. Patricia's proposal was audacious, but there was something about her that inspired confidence. Maybe it was the meticulous way she had documented everything, or maybe it was simply the fact that for the first time in weeks, someone was offering me a chance to act instead of just react. What exactly do you want me to do? I asked. Nothing, she replied, and I must have looked confused because she laughed. Literally nothing. You just need to show up at the party, beautiful and confident, as my guest. The rest? Well, the rest will unfold naturally. When I left that restaurant, I was with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Patricia had given me a card with a phone number and instructions to meet someone called Marcus the next day. He would be responsible for preparing me for the party. Preparing for what? I had asked. To be the woman you really are, she replied. The woman your ex-husband was never able to see. The next morning, I was at the most elegant beauty salon in Portland, being attended to by Marcus, a man in his 40s who seemed to have stepped out of a fashion magazine. He was a stylist, hairdresser, and apparently, a wizard of personal transformation. Darling, he said, studying my face and hair. You have a classic beauty that's being completely wasted. Let's change that. The next 4 hours were a transformative experience. Haircut, coloring, facial treatment, manicure, pedicure. Marcus worked on me as if I were a work of art that needed to be restored. Now, he said, taking me to a boutique downtown, let's find the perfect dress. The dress he chose was navy blue, elegant, but not ostentatious, that enhanced my figure in a way I'd never experienced. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Perfect, Marcus said, adjusting a clip in my hair. You're ready to reclaim your life. In the days that followed, I felt like I was on an emotional roller coaster. Part of me was excited about the possibility of finally having control over the situation, but another part was terrified of what might happen. That's when Brian decided to make his final move. On Thursday before the party, I was at work when I received a call from Lisa. Her voice sounded tense, almost panicked. Rachel, you need to come home now. Brian is here and he brought documents. When I arrived at Lisa's house, I found Brian sitting in the living room with an open folder on the coffee table. He looked different. Thinner, deep dark circles, the arrogant confidence I'd seen on the night of discovery replaced by something that looked like desperation. Rachel, he said when he saw me, we need to talk. We have nothing to talk about, I replied. But Lisa signaled for me to listen. I made a mistake, Brian continued. A terrible mistake. Melissa, she's not who I thought she was. I almost laughed. Now you discover? She's blackmailing other men in the company, he said, his voice trembling. She has photos, recordings, evidence of extramarital affairs. And she's using this to get promotions, privileged information, money. And you're telling me this why? Brian looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was fear. Because she has evidence against me too. Things that could destroy me professionally. And she said the only way I can get out of this is if I get evidence against you. Evidence against me? I asked, incredulous. Evidence of what? Anything, he said, running his hand through his hair. Mental instability, erratic behavior, anything she can use to discredit you in case you try to expose her. That's when I understood. Melissa wasn't just a homewrecker. She was a professional manipulator who had built a blackmail network within the company, and now she was feeling threatened. She knows about Amanda, Brian continued. She knows you talked to her, and she knows about Patricia Williams. My blood froze. How does she know about Patricia? Because she has spies throughout the company, Brian said. Assistants, secretaries, cleaning staff, she knows everything that happens. I looked at the documents he had brought. They were photocopies of emails, text messages, medical reports. Melissa had built a dossier on me, documenting every aspect of my life that could be used against me. She wants me to sign this, Brian said, pushing a document toward me. It's a sworn statement saying you're emotionally unstable, that our marriage ended because of your erratic behavior. And are you going to sign it? I asked. Brian was silent for a long moment. I don't know. She said if I don't sign, she'll release photos of both of us that could end my career. I understood everything at that moment. Brian hadn't come back to me out of love or remorse. He'd come back because he was desperate, because Melissa had become a threat to him too. You know what's funny? I said, standing up. You came here thinking I'd be desperate, that I'd beg you not to sign those papers. But you know what I feel? Relief. Relief? Brian seemed confused. Relief to finally see who you really are. Relief to know I didn't lose a man of character. I lost a coward who would rather destroy his ex-wife than face the consequences of his own choices. I took the documents and threw them back at him. Sign whatever you want, Brian. Do whatever Melissa tells you, because when all this is over, you'll discover you chose the wrong side. When Brian left the house, I immediately called Patricia. She answered on the first ring, as if she were expecting my call. She knows, I said without preamble. Melissa knows about our plan. I know, Patricia replied calmly. Actually, I was counting on it. What do you mean? Rachel? Dear, did you really think someone like Melissa got where she is without being extremely careful? Of course she has spies. Of course she knows about our movements. This is part of the plan. I was confused. I don't understand. You'll understand at the party, Patricia said. Trust me, everything is going exactly as it should. On the night of the party, I was more nervous than I'd ever been in my life. The event was at Portland's most elegant hotel, a ballroom with crystal chandeliers and a view of the river. I arrived as agreed, as Patricia Williams's guest. When I entered the ballroom, I could feel the stares. They weren't the pitying looks I'd received in recent weeks, but something different. Admiration, maybe. Or curiosity about who was that elegant woman who had arrived with the director's wife. Patricia found me at the entrance, stunning in a black dress. "You look perfect," she said, offering me her arm. "Ready for the show?" As we walked through the ballroom, I saw Brian across the room. He was with Melissa, who wore a red dress that seemed to have cost more than my car. When our eyes met, I saw shock in his. He clearly didn't expect to see me there, much less looking that way. "Now," Patricia whispered in my ear, "just watch." What happened next was like watching a movie. Patricia took me to meet various people: investors, executives, employees' wives. Each introduction was carefully orchestrated. Each conversation had a purpose I was just beginning to understand. "This is Rachel," Patricia would say, "an incredible woman who recently freed herself from a toxic relationship. She has a fascinating story about corporate manipulation that you need to hear." And then, without me realizing how, I was telling my story. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. People listened, asked questions, showed genuine indignation at what had happened to me. It was during one of these conversations that I saw Amanda approaching. She was nervous, but determined. "Excuse me for interrupting," she said, "but I think it's time." Amanda went to the small stage where speeches were normally made. She asked for attention at the microphone, and gradually the ballroom fell silent. "Good evening," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Amanda Foster, and I've worked in our company's human resources department for 5 years. Tonight, I need to talk about something that may be uncomfortable, but is necessary." I could see Melissa across the ballroom, her face pale, Brian beside her looking like he wanted to disappear. "In the last 2 years," Amanda continued, "I've documented a pattern of behavior that goes against everything our company represents. A pattern of manipulation, blackmail, and family destruction." She began projecting documents on the screen behind her. Emails, text messages, photos, everything she had shown me, and much more. "Melissa Richardson," she said, and I could see Melissa trying to move toward the exit, but being blocked by security, developed a sexual blackmail system within our company. She seduces married men, documents the relationships, and then uses this information to get promotions, privileged information, and money. The ballroom was in complete silence. You could hear a pin drop. "Sarah Martinez, Jennifer Walsh, and most recently, Rachel Coleman," Amanda continued, "were victims of this system. Their families were destroyed not by chance, but by a calculated plan." That's when Patricia took the stage. "Thank you, Amanda. And now, I'd like to present some additional evidence we obtained in recent weeks." What followed was devastating. Patricia had recordings of conversations between Melissa and other employees, evidence of bribes paid to cover up her behavior, even transcripts of threats made against the victims. "And finally," Patricia said, "I'd like to present evidence that this behavior was not only tolerated, but facilitated by certain people in leadership positions." The screen showed a series of emails between Melissa and the company director, Patricia's husband. Emails that clearly showed he not only knew what was happening, but was actively participating in the scheme. That's when I understood everything. Patricia wasn't trying to protect her husband. She was exposing him. All this time, she had been building a case against him, too. "My husband," she said, her voice cold and calculated, "violated not only the company's trust, but also the trust of our marriage. Tonight, he's being arrested for extortion, blackmail, and abuse of power." As if on cue, FBI agents entered the ballroom. I watched, fascinated, as they arrested not just Melissa and the director, but also other employees who had been accomplices in the scheme. Brian tried to escape, but was intercepted at the door. When the agents handcuffed him, he looked at me from across the ballroom. There was no more arrogance, no more contempt. Just a man who had destroyed his life through greed and cowardice. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal activity. Depositions, interrogations, hearings. I found myself at the center of a federal corporate corruption case that extended far beyond Brian's company. Melissa was sentenced to 8 years in prison for extortion and blackmail. The director, Patricia's ex-husband, received 12 years. Brian, for his forced cooperation with the investigation, received 5 years. But the consequences went beyond criminal sentences. The company was fined millions of dollars and forced to implement new conduct policies. Several other companies in the region began their own internal investigations. Lauren and Nicole, my former best friends, became social pariahs when it was discovered they had helped spread lies about me. They tried to contact me several times, but I never responded. Some betrayals are unforgivable. 6 months after the party, I was sitting in the cafe where it all began, but this time I wasn't alone. Patricia had become a true friend, and Amanda had become my partner in a new consulting company that helped women navigate corporate harassment situations. You know what's funny? I said to Patricia, stirring my chai latte. Brian always said I had no ambition, that I was just a housewife without goals. He never imagined I'd be responsible for bringing down a federal corruption scheme, Patricia laughed. Men like Brian can never see beyond their own limitations. He underestimated you because he needed to believe you were lesser than him. And now? Now you're free to be who you really are. And who you are, Rachel, is extraordinary. Today, 2 years later, I have my own consulting company, a new house, bought with my own money, and a life that is genuinely mine. I never married again, but I also never felt alone again. Sometimes I pass by the old building of the company where Brian worked. It was closed, a for rent sign on the facade. It's a constant reminder that people who build their lives on lies and manipulation eventually see everything crumble. Brian wrote to me from prison a few times. Letters asking for forgiveness, explaining how he was manipulated by Melissa, how he never wanted to hurt me. I never responded. Not because I hold grudges, but because I understood that some people simply don't deserve a place in our lives. Melissa also tried to contact me through lawyers, offering information about other cases in exchange for a support letter for sentence reduction. I refused. Justice is not something you negotiate. Lauren and Nicole left town. I heard they moved to Seattle, where no one knows their story. I hope they learned something from all this, but honestly, it's no longer my problem. The consulting company Patricia and I founded is called Phoenix Rising, and we help women in situations similar to mine. We don't offer revenge. We offer empowerment. We teach women to document evidence, recognize manipulation patterns, rebuild their lives after betrayals. Amanda continues working with us, now as our corporate investigations specialist. She became one of the most important people in my life, proof that sometimes the best friends are those who appear when you need them most. Patricia officially divorced her ex-husband and moved to an elegant house on the Oregon coast. She's writing a book about her experience, and I'm helping with the research. We discovered we were more alike than we imagined, two women who were underestimated by men who thought they knew us. As for my sister Lisa, she continues being my rock. She always says she was proud of how I handled the whole situation, but the truth is, I couldn't have done anything without her support. My life today is different from everything I imagined when I was married to Brian. It's more challenging, more uncertain, but also more authentic. I wake up every morning knowing I'm living according to my own values, not trying to be the person someone wants me to be. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never found that message on the iPad, if I would have continued living in that charade, happy in my ignorance. But then I remember the other women who were victims of the same scheme, and I know discovering the truth was the best thing that could have happened. Brian's betrayal taught me we can survive anything. My friend's betrayal taught me that some people only value us when they need us. But the whole experience taught me something much more important, that the only person who can define my worth is myself. Today, when someone asks me about my story, I don't talk about revenge or how I destroyed the people who hurt me. I talk about how I discovered my own strength, how I learned that being underestimated can be an advantage, how the best revenge is simply living well. Brian was right about one thing. I wasn't woman enough for him, but not because I was insufficient, because he was never man enough for me. It took a devastating betrayal for me to realize this, but better late than never. And if you're reading this, going through something similar, I want you to know, you're stronger than you imagine. You're more valuable than any person who treats you badly can see. And sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of a much better one. Life taught me that people like Brian, Melissa, Lauren, and Nicole exist everywhere. They're experts at finding our insecurities and using them against us. But it also taught me that when we stop trying to prove our worth to people who will never value us, we discover a power we didn't even know existed. 2 years later, I can say with certainty, I'm happier alone than I ever was trying to be enough for someone who didn't deserve my dedication. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of all. Today, when I look back, I don't feel anger or sadness. I feel gratitude, because that betrayal freed me from a life that was never really mine, and it gave me the chance to build a life that is genuinely, completely mine. And in the end, that's the best revenge of all, being genuinely happy.